All right, so thank you everyone for coming. My name is Adamitis, and I am going to talk about the Windows Subsystem for Linux. I also want to give a special thanks to my partner, Steve Rudge, who helped me with this research, but unfortunately could not be here today to present with me. So we're going to do a quick overview. We're going to talk about what is WSL, some of the samples we've observed, how to detect that, and then a couple closing thoughts because we all love doing that stuff. So for those who don't know me, my name is Danny Adamitis. I'm currently a principal information security engineer at Luma Technologies, and I focus obviously on threats to telecommunications and ISP networks. I've been doing this for a couple years now, and my spare time, if you see me afterwards, I love talking about cooking, running, and of course, my dog Cookie, who is the better half. So for those of you who don't know, just real quick, I work for Luma Technologies. This was a rebranding of CenturyLink, Level 3, Quest, Savvis. We do CDN, DNS resolvers, a whole bunch of things. So basically what I want you to take away is we just have tons and tons of Linux servers and embedded systems everywhere. So one of my jobs is to try to find Linux-based malware that's obviously going to impact some of our systems, and that will come in handy in a second. And then as part of the Luma Technologies, we have our own special threat intelligence division that we call Black Lotus Labs. So we have wonderful stickers and t-shirts. If you want to come see me afterwards, you can get one and it's all cool. So real quick, we're going to talk about what is WSL, or the Windows Subsystem for Linux. As you guys might have heard, this is finally going to be the year of the Linux desktop, almost. So for those of you who don't know, WSL allows for almost a near native running of the actual Linux system on your Windows machine. Version 1 was actually first launched in April of 2016, and it was really good, but it was still a little bit buggy. But then they relaunched it in 2021 with the version 2, and it was much smoother. It's very good. It's awesome. And this allows you to run a full Linux kernel. You can actually install this either through a command line with WSL install with some conditions applying, such as admin privileges, you have to power cycle device and do a couple other things, or you can download it through the App Store. And this allows you to run things like Ubuntu or Debian, Kali, Alpine, basically whatever your favorite Linux flavor is, they probably have that. And then again, this kind of allows you to run all of those native Linux terminal commands you guys all love. So if you like doing, apt-get install package, you can do that. You can mount file systems. It just kind of allows you to do some of those tasks a little bit easier when you're like a security engineer or administrator via that Linux command line, but still using your Windows system, so you don't have to have two laptops. And again, this is actually from the Windows website about why you should actually use WSL. It's really good for things like version control on Get. So if you're doing software development or if you're a programmer, it kind of makes your life a little bit easier. You can do cross-platform development with Visual Studio. Everyone loves Visual Studio. It makes life easier. Now you can code your Linux projects using that. You can set up Docker containers. That's a misspelling. I should have caught that. You can also set up and connect to things like databases. You can even connect USB drives, and you can set up Lux containers. And again, this is just all taken from the Windows website. So once I saw that monthly list, I was like, this is literally everything you would ever want if you're a red teamer. You can find the guy who's actually, if I go back, the person who's running the version control of your Git version. That seems like a great box to be on. Someone who's controlling your Docker containers, connecting and setting up all of your databases. This seems like that box you would want to be on to give you the credentials to all of those other databases that you would be interested in the future. So when I saw this, I was like, this must be a huge vulnerability because, or not vulnerability, a risk. Because if you were gaining access to this particular system, it could allow you access to all these other more sensitive systems that are deeper within the network. So that's why I kind of took a keen interest in this, because I was like, well, again, this could kind of lead to other things. It also allows you to read files. You can set up things like Lux containers. You can interact with removable media. This is just a whole bunch of bad things. And then the other really interesting aspect I want to talk about today is you can run an ELF file on a Windows machine using the Windows Subsystem for Linux. And then as I started moving into this, and I kind of talked to some friends who work for EDR firms, there might be a couple people here, they kind of adopted this approach where they're going to treat ELF files like Disney characters treat family members named Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno until it's about 2 hours too late and the house is literally crumbling down around us. So I would like to take the next 20 minutes to talk to you about Bruno, so that way your house does not come crumbling down around you. So this kind of started off with, again, my routine job of just looking for Linux-based malware that could be affecting our systems. And we kind of create these things I call generic malicious. So it just looks for like weird heuristics, weird file names. And one day I came across this lovely file called bypass.elf. And I was like, wow, what are you trying to bypass exactly? This seems really interesting. It was originally designed for a debugging system. It was compiled in Python, and it had a detection rate of 0. And I was like, congratulations, guys, you did it. You bypassed EDR. And then you named it bypass. So they were so close, just so close. So for those of you who have been around, you guys might know this, but if you're not, Python compiled files are actually super fun and super easy, particularly if you're kind of a newer reverse engineer. There's a number of really cool projects already on things like GitHub called PyInstructor. This will allow you to actually take that compiled ELF file or compiled PE file and turn it back into Python bytecode. So this is kind of that first step where you kind of like are unpacking it, and then there's going to be a second step where you can turn the bytecode back into actual human readable Python. So again, this is another kind of fun thing you guys, if you come across, it's fun, it's easy. I thought this was actually a little bit more fun than some of the other stuff written in Go. So when I started running this, this is just kind of like I guess my story. I was running this before, and I was doing this, and I was having a whole bunch of trouble one day when I found some files. And I, of course, did not read any of the error messages because why would I read error messages? It just seems to be working, so let's just keep on going. But then when I went back, I saw that you need to run this file using Python 2.7 to prevent execution errors. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that actually impacts me. It did. So then when you try to run uncompile, so there's basically two things, and I think I talked about the next slide, but basically once you get your Python bytecode, you have to convert that back to real Python. But one of the packages that does that is called uncompile. But if you try to run that with the wrong version of Python, it'll get mismatched and you'll get a whole bunch of error messages. So if you guys are going to do this at home or as part of your day job, let's check out the error messages and make sure our Python versions match, because as you can see, this was Python 3 and I was supposed to be using Python 2. But when I actually did the right way, it worked successfully and everything worked out great. And then once we actually deconstruct that and we get back to the Python bytecode, there's two projects I want to highlight that I really like. I did not write any of these, so full credit to those guys. But there's one of them called uncompile 6, and the other one is decompile 3. The difference is uncompile 6 works for your Python 2.7 up to Python 3.6 versions. If you have something written above Python 3.6, I would recommend decompile 3. The difference is that with the older variants, there's actually a difference in the bytecode of the headers. So again, it works better for that one because it's, I think, 32-bit words for the older variants and 4 32-bit words for the newer ones. So again, just one of those little intricacies that took me about a day. So if this can save you a couple hours, then it was well worth it. So now that we know how to analyze this, I was going to talk about my lovely bypass file. So again, I started kind of going through this process. I was able to kind of get this back to the bytecode, and then I got back to Python, and then this is what I was looking at. It's a little bit blurry, but for those of you who are kind of used to the information security stuff, you'll notice that this looks a heck of a lot like PowerShell. And then I got really confused because I'm like, I thought I was looking at ELF files. Why is there PowerShell in my ELF file? And that's when you can kind of start seeing some of these things like something went wrong, you can't kill an AV, antivirus detected, Windows persistence, time to persist, and that's when I was just like, oh, that's what they're doing. This is actually one of those WSL samples that I thought was going to kind of be out there, but we didn't really actually find before. But when I started looking at this more, I'm like, if you look at the top part, they have a whole bunch of things like Windows Update that they're trying to inject into. There's strings called can't kill AV. There's things called Windows persistent with the actual run key right in it. My thought was, okay, well, this is still just running PowerShell. Like, I'm totally fine. Our EDR vendors got us. And then I looked at the detection rate, and it was 0. And of course, my first thought was, what the duck? Once again, Cookie and her lovely duck. So that's when I was just kind of like, all right, well, this isn't good. We kind of found some of our first samples, and we were just kind of going through there. And that's when we actually did a report back in the fall of 2021. But after we kind of did that, we were like, okay, well, this was something that was interesting, but we're not quite sure what to make of it. So we're going to kind of take some of those really unique rules that we wrote before, and we're going to kind of do fuzzy rules. So the idea is we're going to kind of open it up a little bit. We might get some more false positives, but it could help us find other activity that's similar to that. And then we kind of just let them go for the next couple months because it was Thanksgiving, it was Christmas, everyone likes to have time off, you know, all that fun stuff. So after we kept them running, we went back to this, and I want to say it was January or February-ish, sometime around there. and we actually found a couple more really interesting samples. So we're going to talk about some of those now. There was one that I thought was interesting was a keylogger. We actually found something that was doing shellcode injection. We found a cross-compatible agent that was actually written for ELF file, like actual Linux files, and for Windows files. I thought was really kind of weird. I wasn't quite sure what to make of that one. And then there was more of like a simple file. So I'm going to kind of start off with the keylogger. This was something that I thought was actually kind of interesting because it had like real C2 comms to it. It would actually take all of the keyboard or the keyboard input. It would put it to a file called logfile.txt, and then it used hard-coded credentials to actually communicate with a Gmail address. There was a hard-coded password as well, which we did not publish for intentional reasons, and then it would actually modify the registry as well. So this thing would stay on your system for as long as it would be there until someone detected it. But this was just one of those things where it just kind of showed that like this looks, to me it looked, when I saw this, it looked like people were actually starting to use this in the wild, and that this is kind of moving off that theoretical realm and into the actual real world realm. This was the other one that I really found to be the most interesting personally, and this is actually the Python bytecode, right, or the Python code to the right. For those of you who aren't great at Python, it would basically open up a URL lib and it would grab a resource. In this case, it was a 127 IP address. It would then take the size of the actual shellcode, it would allocate memory in the thread, and it would take that shellcode and put that right into a running thread. So anyone who works for a red team knows that that's a great way to start loading some of those more advanced toolkits. So when I saw this, again, if you're just allocating shellcode into a running thread, it'd be very easy to basically put something like a Cobalt Strike resource on that remote IP address, or a interpreter, or basically anything you want. And that's the thing that kind of got me, because once you have something that's a running process in memory, it becomes a lot harder to actually detect that than if it was written to disk. So again, this is one of those things where, and of course, it had detection rate of 0, because whoever looks at ELF files on Windows systems. This was the other one that I really don't know what the heck this was, if this was somebody's computer science project or if this was somebody who just got bored. But it was this thing called Lee's agent, and again, it was literally called agent.py, which makes life a lot easier for me. But the interesting thing about this is that it actually would modify Linux things. So there was file paths for the auto start, and then there was also file paths for the current registry. This one was actually kind of interesting too, because it looked to be the most, I want to say, almost professionally developed. It was obviously Python, so it kind of felt like more like a proof of concept, but there was like allocated commands for upload file, download file, remove this directory, copy this file, take a screenshot, and it kind of had more of that functionality that you would expect for something that was actually being developed professionally and concurrently, and not just this quick, oh, I'm just going to use this to download my Cobalt Strike and use the same tools that we've always been using. And then this was kind of the one where this was just, to me, felt like a very classical loader. So this would, again, reach out to a remote IP address. It would then download a file as an actual Python file or as a Py file. I'm assuming that was to evade some sort of network-based detection. And then once it actually got onto the system, the script would then rewrite that as an actual executable. It would then decrypt that with a hard-coded key, and then it would basically copy that to the startup folder for persistence. So again, anytime you rebooted your system, if it was in a startup file, your operating system automatically kicks that off. And again, they would just use that, and again, this would just be able to be used to then develop that wherever it was downloaded. So again, that could be a Cobalt Strike, it could be Metinterpreter, it could be a custom payload, or it could be something else. But that was just something where, again, when you're downloading files, you're decrypting them with a key and you're like changing file extensions, it just causes havoc for all of your like network-based detections. So those were the like more custom samples. We also found what looked like open source tools. So again, these are all on GitHub. Anyone can go look at these. There was like a thing called Discord Rat that again provides all the standard functionality that you guys know and love. And of course, this communicates via Discord API. There's a second one called Token Grabber. So again, it was kind of similar to that, and it would basically grab all of your authentication tokens for things like Chrome, Mozilla, IE, Brave. And again, once you had those authentication tokens or authorization tokens, you can basically just authenticate as that end user. The other thing is there's also one that kind of piqued my interest called Telegram. So again, it was similar to the Discord rat. Obviously, the main difference is it communicates via the Telegram API, and to me, that kind of indicates that there was more of a broader interest. So again, if you were hypothetically a US company and you saw something like Discord, you would think, oh, it's one of our younger employees who's on Discord talking to his friends. But if you saw Telegram, it would kind of stand out and say, well, why are we using Telegram? That may alert you. However, if you have a company in some place like Ukraine, everyone there uses Telegram. So again, that would blend in with the traffic because everyone has Telegram installed on their desktop. So again, it's kind of a way for them to kind of choose the project that fits the target environment that they're going after. And again, with these things being on GitHub, there is no development time, there is no development cost. You'll get clone, maybe modify a couple things for an hour, and even without any modifications at all, the Telegram rat had detection rate of 0. So again, you can do this with quite literally no bug shit at all. And then there was the last thing that kind of stood out to me was this credential harvester. So this was, again, kind of based off a public forum website. And it was, again, trying to basically take the contents of your Chrome login database. It would then decrypt them and steal all of that. So if you guys have ever gone and used Google Chrome on your laptop, maybe you log into Facebook, maybe it's your bank, maybe it's your gym, whatever it is, you always get that little pop-up in the corner saying, hey, do you want me to remember your password so you don't have to log in next time? This would basically grab all of those saved passwords. And as you guys know, once you have a list of known passwords for a target, you can then kind of use that for other accounts, because maybe they use the same password for their work email as their personal email, or maybe they use the same password for other things. And again, this thing didn't have any sort of actual detection rate to it. The one kind of unique aspect about this one is that it didn't actually have any sort of command and control channel associated with it. So to me, this would indicate that someone was already on your machine, they already had a shell, they would download this, they would run it, they would get the output, and then probably delete that. And again, the thing is, because it's ELF files, it's kind of hard to sometimes detect this because you don't have all those sysmon tools. So for example, if you guys are familiar with sysmon, there's a file called save PE upon delete. So again, if someone were to download a file, run it, and then delete it, and that configuration was set to 1, it would then actually take a copy of that PE file and put it in archive so you guys can view it later. It doesn't have an equivalent for ELF files on Windows systems. So again, it's kind of a way to sort of get around some of this stuff. But as you can see, it kind of looked like it was based off the open source one, but it was a little bit more narrowly focused on Chrome, and it didn't have any sort of external channel. So it kind of presenting some of this stuff, and then, you know, of course, I was really excited about this. I kind of talked to my boss, and I was like, hey, look how cool this is. This is great. And then, of course, I kind of got the question from her about, well, this is cool, but it's all like Python crap. Like, why are we caring about Python crap? And then next thing is like, we're not talking about campaign. We're talking about what looks like a proof of concept. You know, why are we talking about this? And again, I kind of acknowledge that, you know, some of this stuff still looks like it might be in development, but the truth of the matter is it's still effective. It's still able to do its job. And it, to me, almost kind of feels like PowerShell in 2017, if people remember that, before it got hooked by AMSI. You can type a really simple script in PowerShell back then. It could be 40 lines. You would have great functionality, and you can get away with using it for 8, 10 months before anyone caught it. Again, if you can develop a rat in Python, it's a very easy programming language. It's very friendly. People can do it without really a whole lot of professional skill, and they can still write something that allows them to communicate with an external API or with an external C2 and have a detection rate of 0. And if you make that external thing something like Discord or Telegram, well, now it's not even going to like a dedicated, say, domain or a C2 IP address. It becomes really hard to try to find that noise or try to find that signal in all of the noise. The other thing is, this is kind of my personal, you know, circle of life or circle of threat intelligence life, if you will. So if any of you guys work for an enterprise company, you know that typically you start off with Monday of you get some sort of message from a boss saying, hey, you know, we saw this report the other day, and I was just wondering if you guys are detecting this brand new charming kitten, whatever. And then, of course, that then drives everyone to start writing detection rules for that. As they write more detection rules, more data gets collected. And then as that data gets collected, that thing leads to more reporting, which then leads to more questions from all those other people. So again, this is kind of my thing, is by me trying to talk about this in these forums, I'm hoping that, you know, that will then lead to more people starting to write more detection rules to have spur cycle, to then collect more data, to then help do more reporting, so we can kind of keep this going, because I feel like this is a very viable attack surface. So monitoring and detection, again, kind of best practices. Only install WSL on devices to actually use this. So again, if you are a Kubernetes system administrator and you really need this, yeah, yeah, by all means, use it. It's a great tool. It might make your life easier. If you're working in the HR department and you don't know what a terminal is, maybe those people don't actually need to have it, and then we can kind of reduce that attack surface. Again, because it's kind of running some of this Linux stuff, you can run things like IP tables. You can block outbound connections. So if you're only administering internal databases, you don't need to have an external internet connection. You can kind of create some of those firewall rules to help do things. The other thing is group policy. I was actually looking into that this morning. I think there might be ways that you can do that.
Does IP tables actually work on WSL? I didn't think it did.
It did. It does on the new version.
Okay.
Cool. I think it was actually, they have like their own like command. It's like the Windows Substack command or Windows. Yeah, so they were talking about how they're integrating it now. So I think that's one of the like new features, but it's also really cool. And then like I said, so I think there's group policies where you can kind of limit what can and can't be executed. I was trying to kind of play around with that this morning, and I don't know the exact configuration, but I think if you guys are monitoring, that's something I would kind of look into a little bit more. And then the last thing is, like the previous talk, make sure you have proper logging, make sure you're saving off all those commands. And then, like I said, just make sure you're doing that because there's not a lot of pre-built tools. So as we mentioned before, there was copy upon delete. They don't exist for ELF. So you kind of need to really rely on those other tools to help things work. All right, and lastly, some parting thoughts. So WSL is not going to be as ubiquitous as things like Log4j. Log4j was everywhere and anywhere and affected basically everything from VMware to home routers to anything else. This does not have that same footprint. So the thing is, it's never going to be that large splashy thing that's going to be on the front of the Google News. However, this is still a very serious threat for corporate networks. The reason I think it's a serious threat is because it has such low detection rate, and if you couple that with something like a network API to Telegram or Discord, you're not really able to detect it on the host, you can't really detect it from DNS, you can't really detect some of that stuff from the firewalls. It kind of allows them to live in that dead nebulous zone, so where they can operate and still do a lot of damage. The other thing is, again, because the systems that are typically using this are those power users, I think that also makes this a much more attractive target to people who have WSL pre-installed on their corporate environments. As I kind of mentioned before, we detected a couple of these samples. All the ones I've seen so far were written in Python. I acknowledge there's a bias because I kind of wrote my YAR rules to look for other Python stuff, but there could be other variants in things like C, C++, Go, pick your favorite programming language. And again, there might be more stuff out there. We're still trying to look for that, but again, you're trying to find that needle in the haystack. Again, it's used by power users, and again, the last thing is, by hoping to inform all of you guys might find something in your environment, and again, I would help and encourage you guys to kind of report that either through Virustotal, through Twitter, whatever mechanisms you have to kind of share some of those samples, that way we can all do a better job of defending together. Keeping up with us, so I work for Black Lotus Labs. We did 2 blogs on this, so if you guys were interested, we have a whole bunch of these resources, a whole bunch of these screenshots. You guys can just go there, and again, you guys don't have to go through grainy screenshots. If you have questions, I'm Dan Adamitis. That's my Twitter handle. I'll also be here for a little bit for the happy hour. Feel free to come say hi, get some free stickers. And again, there's also a WSL blog on Microsoft. So that's actually been really cool. Microsoft has their own thing where they do it once every quarter, and they talk about the brand new features that they're implementing. I kind of think it's interesting. If you guys are actually doing system admin work, it's nice to know like what they're working on and how it might make your life easier. I would encourage you to check that one out as well. And again, this is just some of the references. If you guys are interested, I saw some screenshots. This is just where all that was. And then the last thing is just questions. So I think we have like 3-ish minutes, 5-ish minutes, somewhere around there. Oh, a couple more. All right. Yeah, what's up?
I guess 2 questions.
Sure.
One is, are these samples still hitting a detection rate of 0?
So it's picked up, I think, thanks to blog, but it's still pretty low. I mean, it was like 10 or 12, where, you know, if you look at your standard stuff, it's typically around like 30 or 40. So it's getting better, but it's still not where I would like it to be personally.
The second part is, what does the Windows audit logging, like command line level audit logging configuration look like for WSL?
So it's similar to like that of PowerShell. And there's actually, if you go to, I think the second one, if you go back to the second block, we actually linked to a big white paper that talks about this, but basically there's Windows event logging, and again, it looks very similar to like the PowerShell blogging, again, except you see like the bash stuff, so again, you could probably just grep for bash and pull out all those. You can also do sysmon logging if you're more familiar or if you like that more. And again, obviously throw that to some sort of central repository, and you can kind of try to recreate what exactly it was that they were doing. And then the other nice thing is if you do happen to find a compromised system and they were doing this, you may get lucky and you can just view the bash history, which is another lovely thing if you guys have ever done incident response. That guy. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. I've never tried. I don't know. Oh. Yeah, potentially. So I don't know the implications for CPU utilization, if it makes sense or if it will kill your box. So again, I don't want to say one way, but potentially that would be more secure. If you are more in line of security, that would probably work. But again, I don't want to tell you something and have it break your system either. Cool. What's up? I don't think we do, but again, so we don't share the YARA rules per se, but we do share all the samples. So if you want to go on our public Black Lotus Labs GitHub, you can see all the same files. I think most of them are on Malshare and on Virustotal. So if you're curious, you can just kind of take those hashes, download them for free, and you can kind of play with this afterwards. Anything? Oh. Yep, you have to deobfuscate.
So is that how it goes for all your YARA matching?
Yeah, so the YARA rules aren't as good as I would personally like, but basically what we were trying to do was look for, I guess if you want, you can try to find me afterwards and I'll show them to you. But basically it was like we're looking for Windows systems that were running things like Debian, which we don't really see a whole lot since most people are using like Ubuntu or like the routers, and embedded systems are using MIPS. We're looking for things like file size, and then I think there was like one or two other features. I think we're trying to look for like imported libraries like C-types. If you see that, that's kind of a dead giveaway. But again, I will acknowledge they're still really fuzzy. So again, it takes more time to kind of download everything, and then I just run a script to just unpack everything, and then I just kind of look at that. It's still sort of manual at this point, but it's the best bag solution, if that makes sense. Yep.
But it does require basically non-obfuscation. So if you wrote something like a .NET core, which is now multi-platform, it requires that.
Yeah, you still have to do so when you basically when you do like Python, like Py2 exe or something, it actually kind of converts to Python to bytecode, and then it zips up that bytecode, and that almost acts like an obfuscator, if you will. But the nice thing is because it's like a known obfuscation method, it's easier to download that, but the problem is, again, it does take more time and resources. Yep. Anyone else? No? Okay, cool. I guess we can go at the bar early.